Quickly want to give an overview of our problem areas before we bring our champion speech givers to come up. As Greg talked about earlier, about 2.5 months we did a listening tour amongst the 35 member organizations that we have. From that, in our July meeting, we came together and put a broad range of issues and problems that the members thought were important. From that July meeting, we narrowed it down to 9 key problem areas that the members thought was really warranted. We needed to do something here in Nashville. Those were affordable housing and gentrification, education, economic equity, jobs and workers' rights, environmental justice, criminal justice, incarceration and gun violence, health care, immigration, veterans issues, and voting rights and fair elections. Those are the broad stroke problem areas. What we hope to get from today is when we break out into task force groups, after we choose our 3 areas that we're going to champion, we're going to narrow those down into specific issues. There was designated 9 individuals who are going to speak on behalf of each of these 9 problem areas. Their mission is to convince you and your organization as to why you should vote for that problem. I would like to bring our first champion up, and trust me, there is a 2-minute time frame on these speeches. We have a timekeeper right here in front. I want to bring up Mr. Sam McCullough, who is going to speak on affordable housing and gentrification.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sam McCullough, a lifelong resident of East Nashville. My family has had ties to the Cleveland Park area for over 100 years, and to the First Baptist Church of East Nashville for 119 years. Cleveland Park residents have worked hard to fight crime, drug dealing, and other neighborhood problems. We brought our neighborhood back to life, but lately, gentrification has turned my beloved East Nashville into something I no longer recognize. Developers are buying modest, affordable homes, tearing them down, and building 2 incredibly expensive homes on one lot. These homes are often out of character with the rest of the neighborhood, and the developers are ravaging the affordable housing stock to make greater and greater profits. Gentrification doesn't mean revitalization. We want revitalization. Gentrification means displacement. Home values in Cleveland Park and other gentrifying neighborhoods across the city have shot up above the Davidson County average. Residents are feeling the pressure from increased property taxes and skyrocketing rents. Recently, within just 1 week, we lost several long-term residents who have been residing in the area and renting for many years. Unfortunately, one of these residents was an elderly lady named Miss Mary who rented in our neighborhood for over 10 years, but her home was suddenly sold by the landlord. She was not only forced out of our community, but she was forced out of the Davidson County community, finding affordable housing in Sumner County. Our city must take action now on this crisis. Our Metro Council knew in 2009 that inclusionary zoning was possible, requiring that a percentage of all new units built would have to be affordable. But nothing was done. Nashville has a newly created Barnes Fund for housing. It's a trust fund. Unfortunately, there has been no dedicated funding from the city for this fund. Our gentrification problem continues, but there is not the political will to make change. But we must force change from our politicians. In a recent study completed by Metro Planning on gentrifying neighborhoods, the average home value increased by 72.5%. In Cleveland Park, that percentage was drastically higher at 134%. One of our communities across town, it increased by 269%. We must join together to change this trend. Thank you.
We will now have Ainka Jackson to come and talk about criminal justice, gun violence, and incarceration.
Good afternoon. Every 30 minutes, a teen or a child is killed or injured by a gun. 7 die a day by a gun. We have wasted human and financial capital fighting a war on drugs, instead of directing our resources to fighting violent crime. And because of this, families and communities have been destroyed, have been torn apart. And because instead of incarcerating, because we've incarcerated nonviolent offenders instead of providing treatment and rehabilitation. We've declared that we have to have mandatory minimums instead of thinking about what's caused these issues, and so those things have to change. I have been a teacher, a social worker with the Department of Children's Services. I've worked in the adult public defender's office, and now as a juvenile public defender, I'm a guardian ad litem, and I represent children who have been abused and neglected. And I've seen far too many children who are in foster care because their parents are in jail for nonviolent drug offenses. We have to do something about that. Once released from jail, their parents can't vote, can't get jobs, can't have public housing, can't get student loans. This is a problem. Once rehabilitated, too many of these parents are not able to reunite with their families because of these barriers. The time is right for us to do something about this. We have a new district attorney, we have a new juvenile court judge who are willing to tackle these issues, but we have to be willing with them. So whether your issue is affordable housing, education, voting rights, living wages, immigration, healthcare, or veterans issues, this issue impacts them all. And so I ask you to not wait until your family is directly affected, but that we all work together for the good of our community.
We will now have Mrs. Ferlindia Pruitt come and speak on economic equity, jobs, and workers' rights.
Good evening. My name is Ferlinda, and I am a cafeteria manager at Maplewood High School. Just want to let you know that I work hard every day because, one, I love my children. A lot of time I see my children, when they come in the door, I see starvation right in their eyes. And that makes me want to get up every morning and make sure that that child eats a hot, healthy meal. I don't know if you know this year, but Metro Nashville Public School, all of those students are eating free this year. Amen. Go right there. But sometimes when I go home from the end of my day's journey, I'm tired. Because sometimes, well, I will say most of the time, we don't have enough staff. And the staff that they sent me on this year, the first full day was Friday. They brought me in 2 cashiers that actually didn't even have no knowledge of the POS system. So that makes me, as a manager, I'm trying to run the line as well as to see if these people can get educated real quick. My thing is this here. I'm tired at the end of the day, but I'm still going to go to work the next day because I want to make sure that those children are fed. I'm not alone. Metro support system, all over Metro, secretaries, all of us, we're unwedged. I mean, we do really need some help here. So we're asking you to please vote for the real economic justice for real workers. But I also want you to know that for over 100 years, unions has proven to be the best way of workers to get a fair treatment. I'm not just wearing this shirt just to be cute, but I want you to know that this shirt represents togetherness, strong together. Thank you.
We will now have former school board chair, Mrs. Gracie Porter, come and speak on behalf of education.
Good afternoon, everyone. One thing about a teacher, you never ask them for 2 minutes because we are so used to giving you a full day. But I will adhere to my 2 minutes. Just to give you a little bit about my background, I've been a resident of this neighborhood, the Nashville community, for more than 40 years. We have lived in the same community for more than for that 40 years. When we moved to Nashville, we moved to East Nashville and has been there ever since. We only moved there to stay 3 years, but really we got attached to it. But I'm not here today to talk about myself. I'm here today to talk about how important education is to this city. Ladies and gentlemen, many of us have options. Many of us don't have options. And children that are living in Casey homes that are part of my neighborhood and some of the others you just heard about, Maplewood, Stratford, East, and some of the others that have children that are in poverty. 1 minute, oh my God. I heard this morning in church that the church needs to rise up, and I agree, to work on every situation that we have in this city. There are studies that tells you every ounce of information that you want to know. The problems with education, we don't have enough funding. We fund everything else but teachers, workers, cafeteria workers you just heard from, bus drivers and all are lacking because that is a part of the total sum. And that is if a child does not eat, they cannot do what they do in the classroom. If teachers can't teach, we need to lower pupil-teacher ratios, 25-1 or less, and Dr. Goss is here to witness that. The less children that you have standing, with the teacher standing in front, then the more those children will be able to acquire. They said I need to stop, and I will stop, but I will be here to tell you more.
We will now have Mr. Dan Jurenko to come and speak on behalf of environmental justice.
NOAA is focused on promoting social justice or equity in Nashville as the metropolitan area continues to develop. We are deeply concerned about social equality across race, ethnicity, and class. A sustainable development perspective simply asks us also to strive for equity across generations. In other words, we should not leave the natural world that we depend on for our ability to flourish in worse shape than we inherited it. There are 3 additional reasons that we should take this perspective as we face a growing ecological crisis. 1, it is the poor of the world, including our own nation, who will suffer most from ecological degradation. The poorest among us can least insulate themselves from ecological disasters. Furthermore, many live on the margins, and degraded resources exacerbate this vulnerability. 2, many eco-solutions can benefit those with marginal means. Energy savings programs can help fix up the broken down and leaky homes that many folks live in. Moreover, they can save money on the high burden of energy bills. Another example are green jobs, which on the whole require less formal education than most living wage jobs in our current economy. The final reason is that we face a very degraded earth if our generation does not act. The problems from this degradation will soon overwhelm much of our progress in social justice. My organization, Tennessee Alliance for Progress, is attracted to NOAA because we believe it can be a mature and powerful voice in Nashville. Over time, we should move to integrate a concern for the natural world into our total concern for social justice. Thank you.
We will now have our healthcare champion come forward, please.
Good afternoon. Healthcare has been the most divisive issue talked about in the last 5 years in this country. But universal health care is not a new debate. It started with FDR and has been part of a platform for politics in this country since then. We are the only industrialized nation in the world that does not provide universal health care for our members. The statistics are 16% of our gross national product is spent on health care, and the latest figures in Tennessee says that 28% of Tennessee's income is spent on social services and health care. What does Tennessee do and what does the area do? It reduces TennCare. It makes it harder to get attend care for people, and the burden goes on to clinics, hospitals, and health providers to pick up the slack. People without coverage go to emergency rooms, which is the most expensive form of health care, and people without coverage do not get that until the last minute. Who is insured? The wealthy, working people who work in businesses that have enough employees to afford health care, and very, very poor who can apply for and qualify for TEN care. Who does not get adequate health care? The mentally ill in our society. They are a forgotten group when it comes to adequate health care. Cutbacks in clinic money is threatening the right of women to have reproductive rights. Children of low-income families can barely make enough to live on that they qualify for TEN care. Healthcare is the most important issue in our collective power. Healthcare is healthcare a social justice issue? Is healthcare a human issue? The United Nations says so. What can we do as a group to address healthcare? If not us, who? If not when? Now, when? Thank you.
Khaki is coming forward now to speak on immigration.
That's not my minute yet. All right, okay. All right, good. When I started thinking about how to talk to you about immigration, I went back to look at the scriptures and found that Abraham and Sarah had entertained the sojourner, and unbeknownst to them, there was the divine in their midst. And so later in the scriptures, in the Christian scriptures, we see here, do not neglect to show hospitality to the sojourner, for you may entertain angels unaware. So I thought, given that we are the family of Sarah and of Abraham, what do our Muslim brothers and sisters say? And so I did a little looking around and came upon a quote: "The stranger is always blind, even if she has eyes." The stranger is always blind, even if she has eyes. To explain the true vulnerability of our brothers and sisters who are wandering in this wilderness, whether it is by language that they're vulnerable, by economic justice that they are vulnerable, or by the fact that they are more often victims of crime and wage theft than folks who are not immigrants. So looking around the room, it looks like many of us have fallen way or advanced way past our immigrant experience. Some of us came as immigrants to seek out opportunity, and some of us came as immigrants in chains. But whatever it was, we're a long way from that experience. And it's unlikely to be the issue that we choose today. So here's what I ask you. If you choose housing, remember those who have eyes, but who cannot see. If you choose economic equity, remember those who have jobs, but are not paid a fair wage. If you choose education, remember there are those who have minds, but don't have the language to learn. Remember the sojourner in our midst. Thank you.
We will bring up now it's a synagogue. I didn't know how to respond. We can get emotional. I didn't know. We're going to bring up AFL-CIO President Gary Moore to speak on veterans issues.
All right, first of all, let me say it's kind of hard to follow that. But what better organization or group of people to follow it than veterans? I had a few notes, but I'm going to turn it face down and talk from right here. Our veterans, there's not a single individual in this room that doesn't know our veterans a deep gratitude for what they've done. can personally say that I've never served in the military, and those of you that know can look at me and tell my age. I was ripe for the Vietnam draft, but didn't get drafted and didn't volunteer. I have brothers that have served, one in Korea, one in Vietnam. The same brother served in Korea and Vietnam, two other brothers that served. I've got a son-in-law that just got out serving in 3 theaters of operation, Afghanistan, Iraq, and enduring freedom. But when our veterans come home, we forget who they are. We forget all about them. We don't provide them the proper care that they need. All you have to do is look at the headlines for the VA, what's going on with the VA. And let me say this real quick. It's not the employees at the VA that share that responsibility. It's the management. Our veterans come back with post-traumatic stress. They come back with inability to reacclimate themselves to our society. We have totally neglected them, and I think it's time that we start looking after our veterans and reach out to them and try to provide them what they need and make them aware of the services that are already available to them. And I would ask you to vote for our veterans to make that an issue so our veterans can get the things that they need to be provided to them. Thank you very much.
Now, this may be a first, but this must mean how important this issue is. I think we have 2 people that were championing this issue, Paulette and Dick. Yeah. Paulette Coleman will come up and speak on voting rights and fair elections.
All right. The unfettered and unimpeded right to vote is foundational and fundamental in a free society. It is through voting that we as citizens have voice. Voting in free and fair elections is the cornerstone of democracy. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 was enacted to address entrenched racial discrimination and other forms of discrimination. That important legislation is a cornerstone of the civil rights movement and monumental because it ensured every American citizen, regardless of race or language or any other mark of differentiation, equal access to the vote. But unfortunately, that right is under attack. The Civil Rights Act is being gutted by the Supreme Court. We in Nashville are not exempt from these assaults because state and local officials are fixated on virtually non-existent crime or voter fraud. And it is up to you and me, everyday citizens, to protect and safeguard our voting rights. If we don't vote, we keep getting the wrong people as policymakers in our legislation. So we've got to have that right because it cuts across all of the issues. I am asking you to cast your vote for issue number 9, voting rights in fair elections, as one of NOAA's issues of choice and action. We as Nashvillians of goodwill who are committed to liberty, justice, equity, and the right to vote for all must organize, protest, lobby, and act through our mass power movement to safeguard our inalienable right to vote. Thank you.
Let's give one more clap for all of our champions today. It was a great job. Is everybody ready to vote? All right. Okay. We have, in this first round, 36 votes for affordable housing and gentrification, 67 for criminal justice, gun violence, and incarceration. Can you scroll? 185 for economic equity, jobs, and workers' rights, 34 for education, 0 environmental justice, 0 health care, 7 for immigration, and 0 for veterans issues and voting rights and fair elections. So, if my numbers add up correctly, I believe our first issue, our first problem will be economic equity, jobs, and workers' rights. So we have, good. We have 181 votes for affordable housing and gentrification. 65 for criminal justice, gun violence, and incarceration. That's already won. 83 for education. 0 for environmental justice. No votes for health care. No votes for immigration. No votes for veterans issues of voting rights. So, our next problem area on our slate will be affordable housing and gentrification. I believe criminal justice is going to win this round with 175. Well, we go. Criminal justice got 175, and what did the others get? Transparency education got 151. And voting rights and elections got 3. So we now have our 3 problem areas. Everybody give yourself a clap. Now, Benny Overton, who is NOAA's vice president, is going to come up and formally announce our problem areas and make a call for unity. Benny?
We will now prepare for action. You know, divide and conquer has been employed, used effectively throughout history by those who have abused power for dominance and exploitation. Divide and conquer. It served well the desire of the privileged few to maintain a hold on power relative to the deprivation of the majority, perpetuating injustice, which today manifests themselves in the broad problem areas we just chose from. We are NOAA, Nashville Organized for Action and Hope. Ultimately, the hope we desire is reflected in our vision of justice, a vision we all share. I would assert that hope is justified optimism. It's the right to be optimistic. And it's a right that's earned by taking action. For you can't be idle, you can't be passive, and have the right to be optimistic. And it's not any action that grants this right. It takes effective action. Again, the history of injustice, social and economic injustice, has clearly demonstrated that one of the greatest barriers to effective action is division and disunity, divide and conquer. So I submit to you, not just a call to action, but a call for unity. It will take the power of the united to overcome the tyranny of the few. We are now preparing action. Let us engage in effective action. Let us exercise real power. Let us be resolved to realize our vision of justice. Let us be united.
Get on board, this train needs to run on time. Don't you want to see what a city can be when we don't leave a soul behind? Everybody, get on board, Get on board, this train needs to run on time. Don't you want to see what a city can be when we don't leave a soul behind? Thank you.